Good afternoon, and I hope you had a good bank holiday weekend. I'd like to start today by going through the latest figures. The total number of tests undertaken is 4,569. We have had 4,544 tests returned, which means there are 25 tests outstanding. Today we have no new cases. The total number of confirmed cases remains at 336, and there are now only 7 active cases on our island. It now seems surreal that on December the 31st last year, China alerted the World Health Organization to several cases of an unusual pneumonia in Wuhan. The virus was then unknown. As we came into a new decade with hope, a threat emerged that would challenge the world. Governments have always prepared for pandemics, and we're aware of the lives lost due to the Spanish flu influenza of the 1920s. But COVID-19 has served as a stark reminder about how vulnerable an interconnected world is and the importance of coordinated action by governments and health services to preserve life. Due to your efforts, we have got past the peak and the number of cases of coronavirus has been suppressed. We have now gone for weeks with few, if any, new cases each day. People have recovered and left hospital, and our island is now in a much better place than even 2 weeks ago. This has been at a cost to many, and we must never forget those of our community we have lost, and those who have been left unable to grieve properly. Whilst isolated, the people of our island have worked together during the darkest times. Volunteers, care, compassion, invention and bravery have made me immensely proud to call this island my home. People have valued outdoor exercise, reclaimed the streets on their bicycles, and really started to consider where the food on their plate comes from. We need to bank these positives and make sure we can at least take some good out of all the loss we've been through. We must ensure that active travel is an intrinsic part of the new normal. This island has always been a sporting nation, but it has always been inclusive, with anyone being able to participate in a range of activities to suit them. With the announcement last week of a relaxation of the guidelines on gatherings, all sports governing bodies have been sent information to help those involved in the management, planning and organisation of outdoor sports to start a safe return. Indoor sports facilities will remain closed at this time, but football pitches, rugby grounds, sports tracks and courts can reopen. There are still restrictions. No more than 10 people can be in a distinct area or venue. Social distancing must be maintained, sharing of equipment must be minimised, and hygiene measures emphasised with changing rooms remaining closed. I would like to praise the Isle of Man Football Association and a range of other clubs who have been inventive, already carried out risk assessments, and who plan to run outdoor training sessions and coaching. Sports like tennis, golf, bowls, athletics and cricket have already started to re-engage with their existing members and are planning to attract new people to join them. Controlled outdoor exercise sessions and classes can restart, but please make sure you have the permission of the venue if you're intending to start using these. Water sports and fishing have restarted, and as we start the summer now, might be the time to try something different and take up a sport or pastime you've always been interested in. Christian Varley has shown what elite athletes can achieve with willpower and sheer determination. But if you have to stay at home, maybe because somebody in your household has symptoms or because you have an underlying health problem and need to shield, there are a huge range of online classes on everything from fitness to yoga and Pilates to help you improve your own health and well-being. We know that sport is more than just fitness. It helps us mentally and connects us to our island and to each other. I believe we need that connection now more than ever. Culture also connects us. Although performances have been cancelled and rescheduled, the Arts Council have gone online to show how Manx culture lives on in our living rooms and gardens. Performers are being supported, and I hope that our streets will still soon have buskers back and outdoor performances that will lift our spirits and make us smile. Although the Village Theatre has closed its doors for a while, the memories of the last 120 years live on and can be shared. People can share a written memory on the Gaiety Theatre's website or email an audio or video memory to villagaiety@isleofman.im. The Villa Gaiety team are also appealing for anyone with pictures, programmes or memorabilia to get in touch, with plans to create a gallery as part of their anniversary celebrations in July. And artists are working to create ways of documenting what we are presently going through and the effects it has on all of our community. As we move forward, more children are attending nursery and childminders who have been excellent in adapting to new hygiene standards to ensure the safety of children left in their care. Preschool providers have continued to support working families, and I thank them for this. One of the building blocks of our community are its schools. Since most of these closed 2 months ago, teachers have been working to look after those children who need the most to be in school. They have gradually expanded the hub schools to take in more children and allow more parents to return to work. Head teachers have been leading the way in developing online learning, but this can be challenging, especially for primary school pupils. They've used resources such as video lessons produced by the Oak National Academy in England and those produced by the BBC to supplement bespoke home teaching. And yet teaching is much more than setting coursework and marking tests. Teachers are missing the interaction with their pupils and are aware of some who are not engaging with them fully. There is newfound appreciation for the value of schools and our education services. Parents are also more than aware of the lack of social interaction and personal development that school closure has imposed, and many are struggling to work full-time at home and try to supervise and support their children through this difficult period. I've had many messages from them, and your voice is being heard. We cannot let our child's education continue to suffer and let some fall through the cracks while we try and repair our nation. That is why I'm proposing we bring children back to school in a gradual and organised way. There is a growing body of scientific evidence that children and young people are at low risk of catching the disease. If they do get it, they have much milder illness, they are not super spreaders, and that schools can be reopened with modifications without significantly risking the health of pupils, staff or the wider community. Over the past few weeks, head teachers have been working closely with the department to look at their schools and carry out detailed risk assessments. They have been aided with visits from the health and safety teams and literally walked around their school to put together plans, systems and routines that will allow numbers at schools to expand whilst maintaining safety and the confidence of parents. I would like to thank the Director of Public Health for her personal help in speaking and advising teachers on the risks and opportunities available to them. The department have ordered 100 hand washing stations to be distributed around schools, and bespoke plans are now in place for the next phase. After half term, on Monday the 15th of June, all schools will reopen, and after 2 days of extra preparations, all the children who are already being taught in one of the hubs and their teachers will return to their own school. The department is currently working with all sectors of government to perfect plans for catering, cleaning, support staff, transport and testing capacity so that we can further reclaim our schools. Over the next week I will be discussing further plans to allow the key year groups to return to their schools. We need to ensure we have the right facilities and sufficient staff to restart face-to-face teaching and prioritise educational need. But for those pupils and staff who need to remain at home, we need to further engage in remote learning and offer enhanced support and reassurance. Teachers have had to respond to a rapidly changing situation with creativity, supporting those pupils still in school and using online teaching and more traditionally paper-based resources for those at home. Online learning with real-time lessons using IT platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams have been piloted by some, but there have been problems in terms of access. The department will continue to work with and support more schools in further developing this approach. As the Chief Minister has said, we need to put our best foot forward. Over the next weeks, we, as an educational service, need to examine how we move forward without leaving anyone behind. We will need to look at how we can let pupils catch up so that they are ready for the start of the next term. This may involve providing summer schools and camps by engaging with local communities and using the potential of teachers and volunteers. This health emergency has proved to be a wake-up call for the value of education, for the importance of our teachers and the role they play in our society, but also that we can do and should do more to ensure that all the children on our island have a chance to reach their full potential and achieve the future that they dream of for themselves. Thank you very much for listening to that brief statement. And now I'd like to take some questions from the press. If I could start with Tim Glover from Manx Radio.
Thanks to my Minister. Just on the figures that you gave at the very start there, 7 active cases and 5 days, I think, now without any cases at all, which is really good news. But are 2 of the cases still at the hospital?
That's a good question. I can't give the update from the hospital at the moment because I know that some of those residents of Abbotswood who were admitted to hospital this weekend were due to be moved after being found to be free of the virus. Were going to be moved to a more suitable place. So I'm afraid I can't give the exact numbers who are still in the hospital, but it is decreasing. We haven't had any new admissions, and hopefully the Health Minister can give you that answer tomorrow.
Thank you. Just on the schools issue, could we just clarify what the full plan is? Because I think there's a little bit of confusion out there. As far as I read it, the 17th had been earmarked as the day for years 2, 6, 10 and 12 and vulnerable to be coming back. But just for the other years, and you're saying, yes, a gradual way of bringing them back, they will want to know as soon as possible because Absolutely. They will have made plans over the summer. They may get rejigged, but when are you going to let people know what that plan is?
What we've said is from the 15th, we're going to be opening up all the schools. We're going to need to do some quite serious modifications there in terms of how children get round the schools, how the classes are organised. So on the 17th, those children already in school will go back to their own schools. We'll open them up. In terms of getting the year groups 2 and 6 and 10 and 12, I will be making an announcement over the next week about that. We're currently looking at some of the latest evidence that was produced by the Independent SAGE group on Friday, which looks at reopening of schools in the United Kingdom, and had some cautions about it, but looked particularly at the risk in the community. Now, I hope we can work with teachers, work with the teacher representatives, but also mainly work with public health to look at the social distancing in schools, because that's key. I think most people now acknowledge that social distancing, particularly in a primary school environment, is nearly impossible. But we've had the mantra of 2 metres right the way through this. And so we need to find a compromise if we're going to allow and be able to manage a significant amount of children coming back into the schools. That isn't going to be taking risks with them. It isn't going to be making them into guinea pigs. And actually, I've been in conversation with the Education Ministry in Guernsey, who's planning to open all their schools within the next 2 weeks, and also contacted the Education Ministry in New Zealand, who have brought in a 1 metre advisory rule in schools and have managed to dramatically increase the ability of children to come back. So what we're trying to do is move forward in a very safe way on the latest scientific research. And as you know, each day there are more papers, more opinions being brought out. We need to do this safely, because one of the questions David Ashford was asked yesterday was how many people are going to feel confident of sending their children back to school even when the doors are open. We need to give them that confidence. We need to show that schools are safe for them, but also have the backup in terms of testing and tracing and isolating, so that if people do get the virus, whether it's at school or at home and they bring it into school, we can deal with that, we can control that, we can manage that risk.
You mentioned the social distancing, and as we are at the moment, it is 2 metres, which is going to have a serious effect on the capacity of classrooms and the numbers that are going to be able to be housed in there. Are you looking at using village halls and other amenity buildings, or even putting, I don't know, canvas tents up? What are the plans to expand capacity?
Yeah. I mean, what we've been doing over the last few weeks is looking at the existing buildings, existing schools. But you're quite right. If we need to make smaller classrooms, if we need to keep children together more so that they're not mixing as much, we will need extra capacity. So I've already been approached by people who have marquees on the Isle of Man, for instance, who aren't renting them out at the moment to weddings and social events because they aren't happening, who've said, if you want us to put that up, we will do that. We can look at temporary accommodation either in sports halls, village halls, those sort of areas. But the key to this is having the classes right, but also having the staff to be able to run those classes. And that's something we need to do over the next week, is to see, as we open up the schools, have we got the staff to do this as well? Because we may need to have to teach in a slightly different way, perhaps using teachers' assistants with streaming lessons into a classroom, and the teacher actually covering a couple of different classes at the same time. We can do this, and the inventiveness and the dedication of teachers has already shown that they will rise to the challenge of trying to deal with some of the real restrictions that we're having to deal with at the moment.
And just still on the schools, could you just give us an idea of, with social distancing as it is, what a typical classroom will look like?
Yeah. Again, social distancing is only just one of a whole range of measures. So that the key is that if a child is sick, they shouldn't be going to school in the first place. If a member of staff is sick, they shouldn't be walking through the door. They should be washing their hands regularly or using hand sanitizer. If they cough, they should do it into their elbow. All these things that we've been trying to drum in right the way through this health emergency. In terms of social distancing, if we stick to the 2-metre rule, teachers have been going around classrooms measuring up. We're perhaps looking at classes of maybe 6 up to 10 in each class, with a teacher there. That's really quite restricting. And also we need to think about the mental effect of walking into a classroom which looks and feels very different to the one you left just over 2 months ago. How we deal with that transition with the children themselves, because it would be quite frightening for them to go into a class and be told not to touch anyone else, not to go near anyone else, not to do the sort of things that they're used to doing. Instead of sitting opposite one of their friends, they will be sitting beside them so they don't breathe or cough over that person. So we're working with teachers now to see how we can actually bring those ideas into the reality of a classroom. And as I said, what we're going to be doing this week is working with public health, looking at all the available scientific evidence to find perhaps a better way of doing that in classrooms, so we can preserve some of that normality at a very abnormal time for those children.
And what about play and lunch times?
Yeah. One of the plans that have been brought forward by teachers is to operate class sizes, reduce class sizes, but also operate them almost in a bubble, so that the same children play together, have lunch together, have their lessons together. That makes it a lot easier to control any particular risk, but also makes it easier in terms of looking at any contact tracing should we find that we get cases coming through from the community into schools. And again, I think government as a whole have been quite clear that as we move forward, we need to have that capacity to stop at times, or perhaps move backwards if we were to get a surge of increasing numbers of cases. So one of the things we've been looking at is, if we were to get a child who became sick in school, how we take them out of that school environment, how we do the testing, how we do the regular cleaning of that school. So all these things are being dealt with and will be finalised by the time we open the doors to all schools.
Is Josh here now?
He is indeed. Josh, if I can take some questions from you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. You've said that schools will be opening, there will be a choice on whether pupils can return. Presumably not all pupils will be turning up on day one, though, given that choice. And if so, how essential will what is being taught be, and will their timetables be expected to change in some way?
I think the timetable is going to have to change. We're going to have we've already been looking at staggered times for people to come into schools and go out of schools, so you don't have large numbers of people gathering outside. We were also looking at how you restructure the day to have staggered break times, staggered play times, and staggered lunch times as well. But key to all this is that flexibility that teachers have been coming up with. And what they've been doing with health and safety advice is going around their schools trying to figure out the best way for them to provide that service. So I think in terms of the curriculum as well, that will be challenging, because people will want to catch up on some of the things they've lost. But as you say, we may not get everyone back at the same time. So we need to do that in a pragmatic way. Using recorded lessons can help people at home catch up with those colleagues that perhaps in schools at the same time.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, how much consultation is done in your department with head teachers and teaching unions?
Yeah.
And can you just give us a bit of info on what does that involve?
Yeah. Unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of that is having to be carried out virtually. So each week, over the last couple of weeks, the Education Department have been meeting with all the head teachers of the clusters, so North, South, East and West, going through with them what they need to move forward to the next stage. They've also been working in terms of public health and the health and safety advisors to get them linking in with the head teachers as well. And we've been trying to cascade down a lot of the information we have now from the head teachers down to the teachers themselves. And I think overwhelmingly, head teachers have been eager to get back into their own schools. I think they feel a bit frustrated being in the hubs and want to get back to their own environment. In terms of the unions, I'm in regular contact with them, again, either by phone or by email. We're sending some emails through to some of them today with details of the next steps. We need to all move forward together. I know that I've inherited some lack of trust between the teachers and the department, and I recognise that and apologise for that. It's very hard to rebuild that while you're on the other side of a screen rather than when you're face to face. But what I will be doing when we reopen the schools is go around to all of them. I've already been around to the hub schools, but go around to all of them to introduce myself again, listen to what they need and try to provide as much support and advice as possible.
So communication will improve, as you say?
Communication has to improve right across government, but of all the departments that need more communication, it has to be education. We've got a large workforce, we've got a huge challenge. Every school is different, every child is different and has to be treated in the right way. And so that dialogue backwards and forwards is incredibly important. I have all the heads of the teaching unions' phone numbers, they have my phone number, and I'd like to think that if they do run into problems or do have a question to ask, whether it's about opening up schools, whether it's about the education bill coming back into Tynwald, a whole range of things, they feel free to contact me and have those discussions. We will try to work together. We will disagree, obviously, about certain aspects, but we'll try to work together because all of us want the best for the children of the Isle of Man.
Okay, thank you. And a question about PPE, if I may. What sort of level of PPE will teachers be expected to use?
What we've made quite clear is that we will not force either teachers or pupils to use masks, those sort of equipment. We have made PPE available to teachers, and we've also carried out risk assessments in terms of when those might be used. So, for instance, if a child becomes unwell and physically sick in a school, then you might be using PPE. For some of the units with children with extra educational needs, you might need PPE there if you're very, very close to them. And also we need to look after our staff in terms of those with pre-existing medical conditions who may not be able to return back to school because they're shielding, and how we harness their expertise to actually provide some of the online learning that we're going to be needing for the near future. Because again, we've got some children with very specific medical conditions in our community who might not feel safe enough to come back to school. So the PPE is there in terms of aprons, masks and gloves. That has been sent out to schools already, and if they need some more, we will have supplies of that. And also we've made sure that the testing for teachers is one of our foremost priorities. So if teachers do get sick, they will be tested as a priority, and also if any of their family members get sick, they will be tested as a priority. So we can really try to isolate and deal with this virus as closely as possible. One of the things that teachers have often said to me is, well, we're talking about social gatherings and not having mass gatherings. Actually, we're doing that already in schools. We're bringing people together in relatively large numbers. Last week we had over 500 children in the various schools around the island, which has been going up gradually as it has with nurseries and childminders. However, we know that the school environment is very different in many ways to a large crowd in a football field. So we can deal with that risk, we can now quantify that risk and hopefully move forward together, both in terms of teachers, the parents who are incredibly important with all this, and the pupils themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Back to you, Tim.
Thank you. The department was under investigation, wasn't it? The Chief Minister was looking at how the department was going. Is there any news on that? And also, just is this an opportunity, like the Health Minister said, with some of the treatments that will be coming back and will be different? Is this an opportunity for education to look at how we do things, and can we make some changes to the way we do it in the future?
Absolutely. First of all, it wasn't an investigation. It was a report, an independent report on both the structure and function and role of the education department, and also looking at its relationship with both unions, with teachers, and with pupils, how things happen at the moment, and to have an external view of whether that's the best way or whether we could actually do it far better in a leaner way. I think you're quite right that people are already looking at what we're doing now and thinking, actually, we don't want to lose this. For instance, with some of the A-level courses, we have relatively small numbers. We, up until now, have been busing pupils from one school to another to amalgamate classes. Now that we're using online teaching, in the future, surely they could stay in their own schools and Zoom into a class in another school. That would help them with their education. It would save an awful lot of time both for them and their parents and the staff members. But we can use some of the new technologies to expand the education provision on the island. We also need to look at just the working day. If we've got, for instance, A-level students, at the moment they have to come into school for what are seen as free lessons, where they're given study time. Well, surely they could do that from home and perhaps email their teachers with various questions and have to use tutorials online. So I think you're quite right. Although this virus has been a huge disruption, disruptors can sometimes bring out the best in us. It makes us re-examine what we're doing, challenge what we're doing, and hopefully adopt some of the things we've had to do now, but take those forward to actually make our education system even better in the future.
And just a couple of other points, if I may. Yeah. And we've had a bit of correspondence in. Ballacameen School announced at the end of the day on Thursday that a 3-day Year 12 trial was going to be taking place next week. Can you just give us a bit more detail on what that's about?
Yeah, I mean, various head teachers have been thinking about how they can prepare their schools going forward. Particularly Ballacameen have been looking at the logistics of getting their children round the school. Again, the capacity issue comes to the fore, because if we're going to get all those children back, we may have to stagger the days, stagger the times. So what the department are doing is working with those individual head teachers who know their school, know their pupils, and know their staff well, to figure out the best way that they can provide as we go into the latter part of this academic year, how they can get the most children in to actually meet their educational needs.
And just more generally, and this has cropped up quite a few times over this bank holiday weekend, a question. Lots of sectors are starting to now go back. When are Tynwald members going to be physically back in the court and House of Keys and Ledgeco?
Yeah, I think that's an extremely important point, both here and different legislators have been wrestling with that. We've seen the House of Commons trying to get people back in, because whilst we've continued to work online, it actually is quite difficult to have a decent debate with somebody when you're not looking at them face to face. Also, I think the reality is that politicians by their nature are quite sociable animals, and once you isolate them from that, you cut down on those routes of communication, those routes of understanding, and that doesn't lead for good governance. I would like to think that we can get back to a physical Tynwald in the near future. But at the start of this, we did have issues where some people, due to pre-existing medical problems or issues with their family, weren't confident enough to come back to Tynwald. So I think we do have to do some work there to actually get their confidence back, to reassure them that coming into that area is safe, and then we can move forward as a parliament.
And that's true across all sectors of society, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, and politicians are humans. We have the same fears for ourselves and our families as everyone else with this. And I'm hoping that as we get the confidence, as we see the number of cases really going down, as we know that we've got the testing, the isolation, the control mechanisms in place, we can actually come back together. But actually, some of the new technologies we've been using, Microsoft Teams for contacting people, for running various briefings, we can carry on with that, particularly during the summer. We can carry on that business as usual, but do it in a different way.
Thank you.
And Josh, you wanted to ask another question?
Yeah, thanks, Minister. Is there any update on uni students returning to the UK to start university next year, and also them being able to acquire their possessions that may have been stuck overseas? Is there an update on that?
Yes, in terms of, if I can take your first point, I think we've been getting some different messages from different universities. We heard that Cambridge, for instance, were planning to do everything online for the next academic year. Other universities, though, have said that they will open their doors as usual. And so I think we are going to have that fragmentation. I would like to think that as we get into September, if the current trend continues in the United Kingdom, it would be safe for all universities to start their courses again. But some of them, particularly for international students, will probably want to have an online offering as well, so that those people who perhaps can't get into their universities can still keep up with their lessons. And I think we'll probably have a hybrid, that you'll have some people confident to go back to universities, but other people who will perhaps stay online, carrying on with their courses or starting their courses for the near future until we know exactly what's going on. In terms of those students who've got possessions across, I'd like to thank everyone who responded to the press release last Monday. We had 312 students saying they were in that position, where they had possessions across that they were having problems getting hold of. But they were from 65 different facilities, which ranged from Aberdeen to Plymouth. Some were in halls of residence, about 71 were in halls of residence, but over 240 were in private accommodation. So everyone had various different issues in terms of getting their possessions back. I know, for instance, that at Liverpool Edge Hill University, where we had 24 students there, they were having problems even trying to get access to the rooms, because they'd been closed down by the university. But I'd like to thank all those courier firms and package firms that have come forward with really quite imaginative ways of getting those possessions back, offering free packing. And I'm actually going to be writing to all those facilities that where Manx students are having problems at the moment, making them aware of the particular issues with the borders and trying to make sure that they open their doors so that those students can get their belongings packed, can either put them in storage or get them shipped back. Obviously, government is continually looking at the border issue, but at the moment, we can't facilitate people going for day trips to the UK just to pick up possessions. And we need a better way of making sure that they're safe, dealing with those people who are in private accommodation who may need to get out really quite quickly. And we'll be publishing on the department's website the list of all those couriers who can provide this service now at a very reasonable price to get those possessions back into safety.
Okay, thank you. And is there an update on nurseries perhaps reopening, and what will the difference be there within that?
Yep. In terms of nurseries and childminders as well, of the 50 nurseries on the Isle of Man, 10 have stayed open for children who are seen as vulnerable or the children of key workers. And out of 75 childminders, 33 have remained open. We've seen that number gradually increase. We've also seen the number of children needing to access preschool childcare increase as well. And what we've been doing is working quite closely with this sector to reassure them, to provide them with the right guidance, particularly in terms of hygiene, because again, dealing with very young children is incredibly challenging. There's no such thing as social isolation when you've got somebody that young. So we're working with them to provide everything that they need and all the advice they need to gradually expand their service as the number of children who need to come back from working families increases.
Okay, thank you.
And Tim?
Just one more, sorry. Thank you very much. You've been very obliging. In order to instill this confidence in people and to get the world going again, we're still, and we understand why it was originally in a state of emergency. Yep. Once we start coming out of this Orwellian world that we're in at the moment, that's naturally, isn't it, going to instill confidence in people?
Yes, and we've seen just today that Japan have lifted their state of emergency, even though they're actually having a slight rise in cases, but they feel secure that they've got the measures in place, that people understand what they need to do. I think you're quite right. We have to, and we should trust the public. People, without them, we'd be in a completely different position. People of the Isle of Man have embraced the risk, and have embraced what we need to do to get through this together and are moving forward. And I think government does recognise that, and as soon as we can lift the state of emergency, we will do that. Now, that's a legal aspect. The idea of declaring a state of emergency was a pragmatic way at the start of this of dealing with a couple of things. For instance, a by-election in Douglas that needed to be called, the local authority elections that needed to happen, which obviously would have been a farce at the same time as we were trying to get people to stay indoors. But now that we've got the extra legislation we need, I think we are getting closer to re-examine how we move forward, how we get rid of the state of emergency, but still have that stay safe message and still remain alert to the risk, so that if we get a second wave, if we get a resurgence of the virus, we can actually stop, correct, and then move forward again.
Thank you.
And Josh.
Sorry, Minister. Yeah, just a final one from me. Putting your doctor's hat on for this question, really. What level of infection do you believe the UK needs to be at to make it safe enough to reopen the borders? Because it was mentioned last week about it possibly needing to reach the level of a common cold. But I just wondered what your understanding of this was. Yeah,
the Independent SAGE report that was published on Friday was very interesting in terms of the risks. They were looking at particularly risk of going back to school in the UK and thought that the proposed time of the beginning of June was a bit too soon and that the risk would decrease dramatically over the next 2 weeks. So they were sort of saying the 15th of June was a much better time to look at expanding schools. We're in a completely different situation here with the viral risk. The R0 number must be fairly close to zero now. And when you look at other jurisdictions such as, and particularly Ireland, such as Jersey, Guernsey, but also New Zealand and Singapore, they're in a much better position. I think in the United Kingdom, we've seen that although the epicentre was originally in London, the number of new cases and the number of deaths has decreased, but it seems to be gradually creeping up in the same way as it crept across Europe, and we had Italy first and then it went on. I think hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks we will see a significant decrease in the risk in places like Scotland and Wales, in the north of England. The English government have said that they're going to bring in border restrictions at the end of next month, and obviously they have their own reasons for doing that. Our border with the United Kingdom and with Southern Ireland as part of the common travel area obviously is very important for us, and we will look at the overall risk for that border. But the Chief Minister has made it quite clear that our borders are one of our first and last weapons against the spread of this virus. So a complete relaxation would be the last thing we do.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to thank you very much for showing interest on a bank holiday when it's nice and sunny outside, and thank you very much for your time. We've stopped sort of doing shout-outs, but I was contacted by a teacher earlier on today who really wanted to say thank you to Miss Cayley at Cronkeberry School for working tirelessly to support teachers, parents and pupils accessing online learning. And obviously we're moving towards new technologies, new ways of doing things together. So I'd just like to thank Ms. Cayley and all the other teachers out there who've been doing a sterling job to support parents and pupils. But end by just wishing you a very good Bank Holiday Monday. And remember, although we're expanding what we can do, although we're doing more and we're trying to get back to a sense of normality, please stay safe as much as you can, both for your own sake, your family's sake, but also your island's sake. Thank you and goodbye.